I'm Maria Menounos, and you're tuned in to AfterBuzz TV, the ESPN of TV talk. Now, let the buzz begin.
Hello, guys and gals. Welcome back to the after show for FX's docu-series, The Most Dangerous Animal of All, now available on Hulu. We are breaking down episode 4. There's so much to cover. I'm Latoya Blakely, your host, and I am so happy to be joined by my amazing co-hosts. We have Lisa Masi, who is a crime buff, history buff, especially all things California history.
I love all of it. I love all of it. You're right. So glad to be here. Yes, so glad to be here.
Happy to see you. And we also have Cody Epperson, who is a mystery buff and wants to know more.
Yes. And I'm very excited that we're getting closer and closer to the end here.
We are getting very close to the end. So today we're going to be talking about 3 topics: down the rabbit hole, true crime versus fiction, and the fine line that distinguishes the two. And Susan, our co-author, is now on the fence. We also have a new segment and a special segment. But before we delve into topic 1, tell me about your overall thoughts of episode 4.
Wow. I mean, I know we saw holes starting to get poked, in the story last episode, but I can't believe it. This was so shocking. It was really hard to not see spoilers ahead of time. I genuinely wanted to be surprised when I watched this last episode, and I was. Very shocking.
Yeah, I agree. That definitely there were like some little holes, and just this, it just really starts to the story just starts to unravel. Mm-hmm. It's not as tight as Gary wants us to believe.
Yeah, I think the mind blown emoji is a perfect description of how I felt. Leading up to this, I was pretty convinced Gary had pulled me in, and by the end of episode 4, I was like, I have no idea what to believe. Right. Now I'm just extremely confused and a little upset that you've gotten me invested in this story.
Yes.
Yes. It not be true. So there was some mention of the rabbit hole. And I don't know about you all, but I feel like I've heard the saying so many times in life. And while I have a general idea of what it means to go down the rabbit hole, I wanted to look it up. So I want to tell you what this says. According to the freedictionary.com, to go down the rabbit hole means to enter into a situation or begin a process or journey that is particularly strange, problematic, difficult, complex, or chaotic, especially one that becomes increasingly so as it develops or unfolds. And I feel like that is a perfect description of this search for the Zodiac killer, and more accurately, Gary's attempt to prove that his father, Earl, was the Zodiac killer.
Wow.
That was a lot to say.
Nail on the head. That is what it is.
Yeah. So we have a lot of people who kind of gone down this rabbit hole. I mean, Gary for sure. We can say
he's deep.
So deep. I don't think he's ever going to come out, actually. He's
lost down there.
Rabbit hole.
Yeah.
Susan has gone down the rabbit hole. And we also learned that a detective... Lisa, help me out. Tell me about him.
Can you believe this? Can you even believe David Toski, who was the homicide inspector on this case? So he starts sending fake Zodiac letters. I mean, this case is turning everyone into a crazy person. It's unbelievable. Yeah, he would send fake fan mail about himself, was sending bogus letters. I mean, this is really turning everyone into a crazy person. I can't believe it.
Right. So what I gathered, and these episodes are so fact heavy that it can get a little confusing, but what I gathered was that maybe the Zodiac killer case had kind of died down. To regenerate interest, he sent a fan mail letter to the San Francisco Chronicle, basically championing how great he was and talking about the Zodiac killer. And I think they said he actually wrote a Zodiac killer letter.
Oh yeah. Yeah, he did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cody.
He's a faker. Yeah.
Talk to me about this. How crazy is that?
I mean, it just goes into everything in this we talk about this, the Zodiac killer's ego. We talk about Gary's ego. Now we have, I'm trying to think of the word, like a black hole. I mean, rabbit hole, but like it's like this vortex of like sucking people with egos are being brought to this one ego, and it's like it's a trip to like see all like the symbol, like they're trying to catch this guy, but they're trying to figure out who this guy is, and there's the similarities between the killer and the people trying to find this killer. It's twisted.
They even said, someone said on the show, this case has created obsessions that have taken over people's lives. I mean, truly, it's consuming people.
It's insane. And I thought it was funny that Toski didn't get fired. He got moved from the homicide department to the pawn.
Yeah, to the pawn shops. Like,
I thought that was interesting too. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, crazy is the only word that comes to mind. So someone else who kind of gets thrown under the bus a little bit by Gary and possibly went down the rabbit hole of what Gary is saying is true is the original handwriting expert.
Oh, that's right.
Oh, yes.
So they had the handwriting analysis redone basically by someone else who commented about the original analysis, and she says that it was flawed from the beginning. He didn't have enough of a sample to even conduct an actual or thorough analysis. And then the original handwriting expert then suggests that the minister that married Earl and Jude was working with Earl as a Zodiac killer.
Could you believe that? And he said it with such conviction. I couldn't believe it when those words came out of his mouth. Like he seemed so reputable and credible and everything. And then to see this other side of him, like you're saying, he went rabbit hole.
I felt bad for him.
Them did the murders.
With that. Like I wanted someone to say something and say, oh, there was no way the minister could have been a part of it. Lived in Louisiana for his entire life. But
we're saying it now. We are saying it now. The minister has nothing to do with it.
I hope you're right. I think you're right. Thank you for joining in. This is a good time to thank our guests for being a part of the show. We couldn't do it without you. We at AfterBuzz love having the opportunity to come to you on a weekly basis to discuss shows that we love and to connect with each other. We ask that you comment, like us, give us a thumbs up, 5 stars, whatever it is that you do. And please comment. We like reading your comments. We like having an opportunity to answer back. We cannot do this without you. And thank you, especially during COVID-19, where we're all stuck at home. It's great to have something to do, something to talk about, and to produce shows that you all can enjoy watching. So thank you for joining in.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
So we've gone down this rabbit hole. I think we've all gone down this rabbit hole together.
We're all a little in there now.
But then the question comes up, is this true crime or is this fiction? And I actually think this question was first asked by Jude, who is Gary's mom. So she calls the publisher, she calls the editor, and she says, she's like, basically, like, what story are you telling? Is this supposed to be true crime or is this supposed to be fiction? So the idea has been introduced that publishers, HarperCollins is a publisher of this book, they need sensational elements, even of true crime, to sell their stories, right? Because they need an audience. They need people to be drawn in, to be invested in, to be interested in the stories that they're telling. But I think the issue that we're now having in The Most Dangerous Animal of All is it true crime with sensational elements, fiction elements, or is it fiction with the desire to be true crime? What do you think about that, Cody? Do you have?
I want to say it is true crime. Like a lot of this stuff is factual. It's just there are a lot of things that I guess that's an oxymoron, right? It's like Gary does present a lot of things that are true, but then he twists some things a little bit. Like when he adding the when he adds that word to the document, the
Atascadero,
and it's like there's like it's the way what I gathered from that part is that like it seems like it is possible that he was an Atascadero, but it's not necessarily the case. And I think, kind of like we said in the last episode, Gary is so emotionally involved in this case that he I don't want to say able, but what he does is he makes that connection himself without actually fact checking himself. So he's like, oh yeah, Van spent this time in a prison, and here we have this prison, and it was the same, blah blah blah. It must be a Atascadero. I'm gonna just say it was a Atascadero. So, I mean, I don't want to say it's fiction because I don't think it is a fiction, but it's definitely not 100% accurate.
Mm-hmm. I thought it was interesting too that the book editor said that that they were setting a scene, and it wasn't done to mislead, but they were doing a narrative touch-up, he called it. So I think they did base it on some facts, but did take liberties with certain things. And even Susan herself made the comments that she has to use foreshadowing and be a little more descriptive than what they're going off of with the police reports and everything. So what you're saying, Cody, like, you know, they have to make it into a compelling story. It is based in some facts, but I do feel like they were taking liberties with the story.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I have two thoughts. The first one is I feel as though it should not have been that hard to figure out or confirm whether or not Earl had been to Atascadero.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't know why someone couldn't have called or gone to this facility and asked for records, unless it was because of the time and the year. Maybe they didn't have records from that long ago.
What you said, like Susan had said at a certain point when Gary would tell her something, she just started to believe it. There were so many things that he was giving her proof and evidence for. She said to herself, she didn't fact check everything because so many of the things that she questioned him on, he had proof to show her. And he did show her something that said Atascadero on it, but that was something that he had already doctored.
Yeah, but even after
That's
that, like,
right.
we don't have the answer now. Did he go to Atascadero or did he not go to Atascadero? And so I just thought that should have been something that they could have easily checked and or ruled out by saying we did check and there were no records. And my second thought was this editor who basically seemed to have the attitude of like, it's my job to sell books and we sold books.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right? He was like, that's the job. That's what we did. And I don't have anything else to say about it. And I was like, got it. Thanks.
Right. They were like, oh, it's not our job to fact check what these authors are saying. That's their job. And it's just like, but you're publishing it. Like, you don't want to like make sure this is what you're doing is right. Like, what if the whole thing is plagiarized?
And that's exactly what they said. They said that most nonfiction books are not fact checked.
That's unbelievable. That's crazy.
I know.
But you know, oh, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
No. Well, what I was going to say is like the point of all this. So the book was a New York Times bestseller. It was a fascinating read. I feel like if they had just prefaced it with, if they didn't sell it as nonfiction, if they just sold it as an interesting story, like based on a true story, you know, I think that's what the problem is, because I would probably still read the book if I knew everything wasn't true, but it was just going to be an interesting read.
That is true. That's very true. But then I think that brings us into the next point of, you know, at this point, the book is out. People have read the book. We have these online forums. We have Jude. And even Jude's sister was like, I was really excited to read the book. I thought that I was finally going to get these answers. And right away, I think she said her hair was on fire or her head was on fire as she read the book, because she said it just started with like untruths and fabrications. So now people are posing the question of, is Gary a con man, or does he believe the things that he's saying? Lisa, what do you think?
I think he really believes it. I think he's so invested in the story, like we've talked about. He wants this for his identity so much. I think he needs this. He needs this to be true. And I think he's convinced himself, even if he did change things, even if he did write Atascadero on there, I don't think he did it in a malicious way. I think they said someone had said to him, oh, your father could have been in Atascadero. So he was grasping for anything. I don't think he's a con man. I just think mentally he needs this to be true. I don't think but I do. That being said, I think he does use people. He used Susan. He used his mother. You know, he was taking what he wanted from them. So he might not be a con man, but but he did some really not nice things to people who were in his inner circle.
Cody, what do you think?
I completely agree with that. That's like, I don't like, I think that he believes that. I don't think he's sitting there going, oh, I'm going to make people believe that the Zodiac killer is my father. And I don't think him putting a Tascadero on that paper was malicious. I think he truthfully thought he had made a connection that someone else hadn't made. So he was like, yo, that's a Tascadero. That's where he was. And, but it's, again, it goes back to that whole, like, he's so emotionally invested that he's seeing things that aren't there or not seeing things that are there. And, I don't remember the question or if I answered it.
You did. I don't think he's a con man. I don't think.
Oh, yes, that's what I think. I don't think he's a con man. I think he is very. He believes what he's doing, and he is passionate about it.
I do have a question, though. I understand the need to have an identity. I understand the need to know who your parents are, but he already had that information. So I guess I don't understand the need to make Earl the Zodiac killer. Like, I think that I've missed that connection and like why that was such a strong need and desire for him.
That's a very interesting point. I didn't really think about it like that. Like, he knows Earl Van Best is his why, like, he has it. He has his identity. Why does he care so much whether or not he's the murderer?
Yeah.
Unless it's truly
never like thought that way.
Unless it's truly just that he dedicated so much of his life and ruined so many relationships, you know, like so much of his life is dedicated to this. I mean, for him mentally, what a letdown for this. I don't know. I feel like he needed that to be the case. Otherwise, what was all this for? I feel like it was always more than just figuring out who his father was.
And Lisa, that's a good point. I wrote this down that Gary said this. He said, I could continue this journey for another 10 years and never feel any better about me. Like, that's a lot.
Yeah. But Latoya, you know what? Okay, so I wrote that down too. That's a really interesting quote. So he said that, but then his license plate says Van Best on it. So, you know, whether or not his father was the Zodiac killer, his father was not a good man. So for him to put his father's name on his license plate, I mean, there's a disconnect here between how he's saying he feels and him kind of being proud about who his dad is.
I think that, and not to say he has not already done this, maybe he has, but Gary would do well to be in therapy.
Yes.
And to spend a little bit of this time talking through these issues.
Yeah.
Now, after saying that, I must say that it is obvious that he is pained, and he is pained for legitimate reasons. Like, I don't want to make a joke about his experiences, the things that he's gone through, but at what point is enough enough? And then at what point do you stop playing the victim? Because I
very good point.
Played that card this entire story.
Yeah,
I agree.
Absolutely.
And there is that disconnect that you're saying, and it's just and it goes back to his ego. Like, it's like he's going on all these talk shows, all these news shows, and talking about this thing, and it's like, you already know who your father is. Now it's all about this publicity of maybe he is this unsolved famous murderer, and like you said, it's like it's very weird how it's like he's proud of his own displeasure in his weird fame. Like, I can't even say it properly. It's
strange, right? There's
a
lot of ego associated with this pursuit. And so I think that ego is what's jeopardized and or ruin his relationship. So, you know, the relationship with the mom, I think maybe at the beginning of episode 4, it could have been episode 3. The mom had said that she hadn't talked to Gary since the book had been published, or she hadn't seen him.
Yes.
And then Gary's wife says that when things aren't right with the mom, things aren't right in his world. But instead of fixing it, his attitude is, I don't need her.
Right.
So he doesn't talk to her. We know he's been married several times. And now at the end of episode 4, we find out that there's friction between him and Susan. Because now Susan is on the fence, and Susan does not know what to believe. Lisa,
I felt. Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I felt so bad for Susan. Well, I felt so bad for the mom and for Susan. During the interview, when they told Susan about the information, how Gary had written Atascadero on there, and she started to get like angry and choked up and had to walk away. I felt so bad for her, because I truly think that she had the best intentions writing this book. She is a well-respected author. She has done a lot of, really well-written true crime novels. She was afraid was going to tarnish her image. It did to a certain extent. I think she was able to redeem herself at the end, but so I felt bad for her. She was so blindsided, and she did mean well by, I think, originally teaming up with Gary to write this. I don't think she was trying to, pull a fast one on us. I think she believed it, and to see them present her with that information on camera, I felt bad for her. Can you imagine everything you've worked for your whole life? Like, you've built up this credibility, you've built up this reputation for yourself, and to just be on camera and have someone confront you with something like that, that's horrible.
Yeah, I agree. And some of the things that we found out that there were discrepancies. Also, we should mention that there was a private investigator that has been brought on by episode 4 to substantiate some of the claims in the book. And the private investigator said that there were, quite a few things that he could not substantiate. So Atascadero, we've already talked about. We talked about handwriting at this point. We've talked about the fingerprints at this point. There was some confusion, and I was confused watching it over the markers. And I get the feeling that, Lisa, you may understand that better.
No, I wish I did. I'll be honest with you. I have to find my notes. So I'm like, what is he saying? No, he went off on like a 10-minute tangent explaining the markers. And to be honest with you, he lost me at that point. But when the producers confronted Gary about that, hey, something's not matching up here, he lost me with his explanation. But I did notice that his demeanor changed. Did you notice he kind of got like angry and frustrated anytime the producers kind of asked him about something that was contradictory to what he had said?
Yeah. Cody, did you pick up on the markers thing about like sending in the markers, but the markers were blurred? Probably not.
With like the ABC special and like the DNA markers, you mean?
Yes.
Yeah, that was, he did kind of go on a bit of a ranting ramble about that. But what it sounded like was that regardless of what the blurred ones on TV, whatever numbers they were, it seems like there was still a DNA match from the envelope to Gary. So I think that's what he was saying, was like people were discrediting him because him and Susan looked at those blurred numbers and came up with this separately, came up with the same numbers, like trying to figure out what they were blurred. But then regardless of whether or not they were correct, there still was a DNA match between the two.
So Cody, when you say that, it makes me think about Perucci. I think he was an inspector and he was working on a case at some point. And so Gary really fixated on the fact that he says Perucci called him and said that we cannot exclude your father as the Zodiac killer, cannot exclude. So in Gary's mind, Perucci was basically saying like, yes, your father was him, the DNA matched, and whatever else Gary assumed. But Susan meets with Perucci and she asked about that. And Perucci was like, I wasn't referring to the DNA. I just said that like based on everything, Earl couldn't be excluded. Did either of you have an opinion about Perucci?
I'll be honest with you. I found him interesting. He seemed to be someone who got a little caught down the rabbit hole too. Were you thinking that too a little, Latoya? Yeah. Yes. It's interesting. I don't know. I feel like there's two sides to what he's doing. Because he's saying he was a big fan of the book. He kept saying he really liked the book. So Gary had said originally that Perucci had made some sort of comment about, oh, this is going to help you sell a lot of books. And although Perucci is denying that he said that, he said a couple times in his interview with Susan that he kept saying, oh, I like the book. I really enjoyed the book. So I think, he could have said that. I think he was a fan and getting wrapped up in everything that was going on. he said he didn't have knowledge that the Zodiac himself licked the envelope, whereas originally they said they were led to believe that Zodiac did lick the envelope. He said Gary misinterpreted it. I don't know. I just feel like there's two stories here, and I think he too was getting caught up in the story and wanted it to be true and wanted to be involved. I don't know if I entirely believe his final interview with Susan.
Yeah, I agree with you, Lisa. I wrote down that I don't know if I believe Perucci. Like, he just seemed a little too like slick and prepared for like his 15 minutes of fame. Yeah, and he kept saying, I like the book. And I think at one time he was like, well, I don't know if I said that, but what I said was, yeah, I just felt like something wasn't right with him.
Oh, and Latoya, to your point too, I read online that the producers of this documentary had actually reached out. So after they finished filming the first part, they reached out to Susan and also to Perucci and asked Perucci if he would be open to doing this. So he had some time to prepare. He had some knowledge. He knew that she was going to be fact checking with him. So yeah, to your point, I think he was polished and prepared for that.
Cody, do you agree? Do you have a different opinion about Perucci?
I agree, and I think this kind of just came to me. I feel like, because especially when all of this was taking place, like I know, like not the documentary, but like when all these real things were happening, it wasn't like it is now, where it's like we're with AfterBuzz and we have this outlet to be on camera and people can see us. And I think there was probably this fascination of this limelight, this attention, and that's probably why people. I feel like we're sort of. This is total speculation. I feel like that's maybe how some people got a little trapped in that role, because this story did get a lot of attention, and if they were close to it, they were part of that attention and part of this, like a part of something. And I think that may be where this discrepancy is coming from, because like you said, Gary says he said one thing, but he's like, oh no, I never said that. I said that it would be good for your book, or I said that I like this book. Like I never said that, or whatever. I'm a little lost in the rabbit hole myself all of a sudden.
No, good point. So yeah, good point.
So Susan also brought up the letter from, I think it was a daughter of Earl's, and it was a letter about Austria. And so the important part of the letter is that basically it places Earl in Austria until 1970. And so for Susan says if Earl was not in the States in 1970, there's no way that he could be the Zodiac's killer. So it seems to me as though episode 4 ends with Susan being convinced that Earl is not the Zodiac killer. And she says something along the lines of, it's Friday the 13th, so I'm going to get drunk and like burn this book.
Yeah.
I think that thought, if it's okay with you, Lisa, and you, Cody, takes us back into Lisa's news, because you have an article that dates after this is done with. And by this, I mean the docu-series.
Okay, so I've been dying to know, I don't know about you all, like what happened with Susan, with Gary after all this, after everything hit the fan, what's been happening. So I'm going to refer back to an article on Vulture online. I highly recommend you guys check it out. It's really interesting. Where they asked Susan, do you think Gary made a mistake, or was this all deliberate? And she said, I don't think he made a mistake. I don't think Gary did any of this on purpose. I would like to be very clear about that. What I think now, honestly, is that he saw what he wanted to see and discarded the rest. I think we kind of talked about that a little bit. And then as far as the whole Atascadero thing, how that happened, she explained it. I'm still confused by it. But they said, she's like, here's what happened with the Atascadero. In the original police report, the sentence for his father was fraud by wire and was a 90-day observation. Gary, in his original manuscript, had duplicated the police report, but he had taken out the 90-day observation and put in Atascadero, 90 days in the Atascadero State Hospital. He didn't alter the actual report. He changed it in the manuscript because he told me Lieutenant Hennessy had told him, see, Gary, you're right. Your father's in Atascadero. So I don't think that was an attempt to deceive as much as what he believed at the time. It's still confusing to me a little bit, but she doesn't think that he was trying to mislead anyone. So they asked if she knew that this was coming. When the producer sat her down, she said, no, I didn't see it coming. Gary and I were told we were going to be doing our final interviews in Los Angeles. We believed all along that the documentary was following the book. We had no clue that it had veered off. She did say that the producers were giving her hints. Susan, what would you do if you found out if this weren't true? But she still had no clue. So the producers separated her and Gary that day and interviewed her first. She went to lunch with one of the producers, and the producer said, don't look at your phone. They took Susan's phone away so that Gary couldn't text her and warn her about anything. They wanted her honest reaction. So when they brought Susan to the set, she had no idea. And she was like, oh my gosh, they found discrepancies, and she was devastated. When she came back to Baton Rouge, she went through a dark time, but then she wanted to do something to clear her name. So that's actually when the producers reached out to her and offered her a chance to interview Perucci on camera and get his take on it. The producers asked if she has any kind of a relationship with Gary today. She says, yes, I do. When we were writing the book together, we were good friends. When the book came out, we went through a rocky phase, and then we were back to being harmonious again. And now it's a rocky phase again. So a lot of emotions, understandably, good days and bad days. Do you think he believes that the Zodiac killer is his dad? And Susan says, yes, absolutely. Over the last 18 years, he's become so intertwined in the story. It is his identity. That's who he is. And then it's interesting. The producers asked her, what did you think about him driving away with the Van Best vanity plate? She said, I wondered about that myself. I even asked him about it the first time I saw it. More than anything Zodiac related, that's part of his identity. And I know we talked about that before too, about the license plate. Even though his father wasn't a good man, and he said he can never be happy with this information, it is him. It's him, and he is proud of it to a certain extent. And Susan and everyone sees it now. I don't know. I highly recommend you all check out. There's more to the interview, but yeah, on Vulture, you have to see the interview between where they're asking Susan about what happened after the show.
That's just so much.
Yeah.
And listening to you talk about the producers separating them, taking her phone, I'm just like, that sensationalism at its best to get that moment caught on camera. As well as this makes me want to go and really look up the EPs, the producers, the creators of this docu-series, because I really want to know what was the goal. What was the point of the docu-series? Because I'm more confused than ever.
Right.
And now I'm interested about a topic that I never really even thought about.
Yeah.
Right. So I just wonder what the point of it was.
I thought I had read somewhere, maybe I'm mistaken, but I thought I had read the original goal of the documentary was to cover this book. It was a New York Times bestseller to cover the book. And then I swear, I don't remember where it was, but then I think as they started seeing discrepancies, then it became, okay, let's get to the bottom of this. And then Susan and Gary had no idea that the producers had twisted the goal of the docuseries to essentially uncover, discrepancies.
Right.
And debunk everything.
Cody, who do you have to tell us about today?
I found another really good one. There we go. Their name, this one's a little iffy. The guy's name is George Hoddle, but let me start at it's a little bit of a story. Let me start at the beginning.
Hold on, let me just say very quickly for our audience that Cody is now coming live with a special segment. And we will be talking about the child of a famous serial killer.
Yes, thank you. That did need a bit of an introduction, didn't it? So on January 15th, 1947, a woman taking a walk with her daughter stumbled upon a body of a naked woman, badly mutilated, cut in half at the waist. The deceased woman was later identified as Elizabeth Short, an aspiring actress who moved to LA. She was post-human. Ooh, I can't read. She was Thank you. She was given the nickname the Black Dahlia. While the case remains officially unsolved, former LAPD officer Steve Hoddle believes that his father, George Hoddle, is the one who killed her and others, as Hoddle topped the LAPD's list of suspects at the time. Steve says he never got the idea that his father might possibly be a murderer until after his father's death in 1999, when Steve found a picture of the Black Dahlia while going through his father's possessions. So like after, like, never thought his dad was a suspect until after he died, and he found a picture of the woman who was dead in his father's possessions. So now 74 years old, Steve has spent over a decade cataloging evidence that his father was the Black Dahlia killer. He published his first book, Black Dahlia, Avenger, The True Story, in 2003, and went on to become a New York Times bestseller. Steve's investigation is also the only one that the DA's office has officially recognized. Steve now lives in LA with his girlfriend, Rebecca. So it's like, it's crazy. Like, he is an LAPD officer, and then his father, like, he doesn't even find out that his father is potentially the suspect until like years later after his father's dead, and finds a picture of this dead woman in his father's possessions. Like, that's real creepy.
That's crazy.
I read that book, not the story of, I guess, the dad potentially being the murderer, but I read the fiction book Black Dahlia a long time ago.
Yeah,
you guys know that
yes.
in LA here, there's actually tour buses that will take you to different crime scenes of things that have happened in this area, and there is a Black Dahlia tour also. I think that would be so interesting to go on.
Yeah, that'd be cool. I was thinking about that though, like doing this special segment. I'm like, I can go to that library and see that and be like, yeah, someone was murdered right there on the grass. Like, it's kind of like weird to know these things.
Do you think that people, so I think it's interesting that this son, LAPD officer, spent 10 years cataloging evidence of his dad being this killer. Do you think that that just truly comes from like a need to answer that question and to know that about your parent?
You know, I want to say yes. That does seem like it's one of those things, like you have to, like, I think I'm one of those people that, like, don't ask questions you don't want the answers to. But like when it's something that's so drastic or dire like that, I feel like you have to know, like, yeah, like, is that something that like my father was like, because that's you didn't know this until he had passed away. And it's like, it's kind of like what we saw the guy in the last episode, like, he had no idea his father was taking him to soccer practice. And similarly, it's like, you don't know. And it's like, how could this be possible? Like, I have to know if this is true.
And I think that I can understand his search, his being the LAPD officer search, more than Gary's, because at least in his case, it sounds like he knew his dad. He grew up with his dad. He knew him to be this way. And then you get this information that potentially all of that was a lie. So I guess I can understand in that situation, like really needing to get to the truth to figure out who this person actually was.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting too, when you think about something like that, because maybe in some regards he wants to protect the image of his dad. I don't know. Like, I can't imagine if you were to find out that sort of information about your own family, would you go public with it, or would you want to protect, since your parent is no longer alive to defend themselves? Would you, I don't know, like, would you go public with that, or would you keep that information to yourself? Especially if you don't know for sure if it's just a speculation.
I have no idea. But then, like, as a police officer, to find something that seems like, oh, this is evidence that it could be, like, I guess maybe you're just in that, you're in a bind of like what your job is to figure out, or family.
Yeah. Well, hopefully that's not a situation that we can ever personally.
Gosh, yes. Yes, all hypothetical.
Right?
Yeah, hypothetical.
Well, Lisa, Cody, do either of you have anything else to add?
One thing I actually did want to say was, so at the end, Susan's like, oh, well, if Van wasn't in the United States in 1970, there's no way he could be the murderer. But correct me if I'm wrong, didn't they have the one guy, the private investigator? He did a timeline, and it was like 1970, like 1975. There's this like gap where they couldn't place Van. Am I incorrect in saying that?
That is true.
So, I mean, it's not like Susan seems like, oh, well, if he wasn't here, he can't be the murderer. But it's like, but we don't, this is how I feel about how it ends. Like, we don't know. Like, it seems like it very well could be Van is the Zodiac killer, but there is this gap that we don't know about in the PI's investigation. And one thing, I mean, and I don't know if you guys have anything to say about that, but I'm very curious about this family in Belgium, because they remember when we first heard from them, they're like, don't contact us. We don't want to talk to you. So I feel like there's definitely something there. Maybe I'm part of this conspiracy theorist forum now, but that's my I think that that gap in his placement in the world and the family, I think that's a foggy area that needs to be looked into.
For me personally, that gap was that question was answered for me when they did talk to the family in Austria and said that he was in Austria during part of that time, because I think Van had told people that he just dropped off his family in Austria and came immediately back to the US, and then that was proven to be not true, that he actually remained in Austria for I think it was at least a year. And then they said that's when the bulk of the Zodiac killings happened. During that time, he was in Austria. So for me, it cleared that up. But yeah.
Well, just to add to that, I'm with Cody in terms of not being clear, because it seemed like the letter said he came back in 1970, but it didn't say at what point he came back in 1970. And then Susan was like, well, if he wasn't here in 1970, it couldn't have been him. But I was like, maybe he was there in 1970. Like maybe he came back in February of 1970. But the most interesting thing to me was, and I didn't know this, and maybe you all did know this, that his wife was his social worker from prison.
Yeah.
That is interesting.
Okay.
Gosh, if we could pick her brain, like
right?
Cody said,
right?
Cody even said, you wish you could talk to that family. Yes, if we could pick her brain. Wow.
That's who we need to talk to. Guys, it's been so much fun watching this series and talking about this series with the two of you. It was so much to unpack. It was a mind bender for sure. Oh, yeah. And you two are amazing. So
Latoya, can I ask you a quick question?
Yes, of course.
Okay. So I told my parents to watch this. I'm like, you have to watch this docu-series. It's so good. They love this sort of thing. So when they finished it, my mom's reaction was, well, that was a total waste of time. I disagree because everything was debunked. Do you feel that way? Do you guys feel it was a waste of time, even though things were kind of debunked at the end? Or did you still enjoy it?
I enjoyed it, but I don't feel like I know anything. You know what I mean? Okay. Like I don't feel like questions have been answered. So from that standpoint of like having an answer and knowing what happened, I could see why your parents would feel like it's a waste of time.
Okay. What do you think, Cody?
I don't want to say it's a waste of time, but I feel like this happens a lot with like mysteries and murder things, or if you watch like the History Channel, it's like, oh, what happened with the Great Pyramids? And you watch it and they give you all this speculation and then you don't get an answer. And but I feel like with this, we did learn a lot of facts and a lot of interesting things. So I don't think it was a waste of time, but a part of me did think we were going to get a more solid answer at the end.
Yeah, it was definitely enjoyable to watch.
Yes.
And left a question that maybe I'll look into later and try to get more answers. I really just want to call it the Cascadero and be like, was he there or was he not there? Like, tell me that.
Can you just tell us?
So, but guys, it's been amazing. That's it for the most dangerous animal of all. We covered all 4 episodes. We talked about a lot. Do feel free, if you've watched, to go in and comment. We would like to read your comments and just see what you thought about the episode. Lisa, Cody, where can our viewers find you?
You can find me on Instagram at Lisa M. Masi. That's Lisa, 2 M's, ASI. And also I'm doing the American Idol after show panel on Sunday nights at 10 o'clock.
I'm on Instagram as Cody Epp, CODYYEPP, and you can find me on the Making the Cut after show Fridays at 5 p.m. and then also HBO's miniseries The Plot Against America, and we do our after talk at 3 p.m. on Tuesdays.
And I'm Latoya Blakely. You can find me on Instagram at Latoya.Blakely, on Twitter at Blakely Latoya. Thanks again for viewing us, tuning in. Stay safe, stay sane. Maybe check out some online workouts. Some of the gyms, local gyms.
Yes.
A lot of them are free. Keep your body moving, keep your mind at ease. And keep tuning in to AfterBuzz. There are so many shows that you can tune into and watch. You can see Cody, you can see Lisa. So we hope to see you again soon. Thank you for joining in. Until later. Buzz you later. Until next time.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Our founder, Keven Undergaro, and me, Maria Menounos, would like to thank you for tuning in to AfterBuzz TV. Remember, we're not just the first, we're the biggest in the world, and we're the only destination for all your favorite TV shows. Whatever you crave, we've got it. So go to AfterBuzzTV.com and check out our lineup. Buzz you later.
The views expressed herein are those of the hosts only and do not necessarily reflect the views of AfterBuzz TV or its owners or principals.